Good afternoon. This is Pastor Craig on another edition of 12 at 12. I want to jump right in again this week on things that happen after the Easter. I want to ask a question, not really one I want you to answer. It's kind of a if kind of statement. But if you sit and think, you can probably understand what it is that you really value and why you value it. We all have people we influence, and we all have people that influence us. So the Bible is consistent about sharing with that influences and are very important to our character development. That's to say that when we are influenced by the right people, it helps us to make the right decisions. When we influence correctly to our children or our mates or spouse, our other congregants, people that we live next door to even, if we're sharing correctly and we influence them correctly, that can be a good situation. So, let's use Peter in the Bible. There's a life lesson from Peter, and man, can that guy, you could take a lot of different lessons from Peter, but I want us to take a quick look in there, and I want to see what it was that he role modeled in the power of an influencer has. Okay, so we see him in John. First mention of Peter is in the first chapter. Now, we use that rule when we're talking about a general concept in the beginning of the Bible, so why not use it in a book of the Bible? So it's not the only book that writes about Peter, but it is a book that has an authoritative view on it. It's one of the four Gospels, and so let's look at it. And it also, it's kind of neat to note that it's also in the very last chapter of the book of John. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at three things as we plow through this, and we may have to get in a hurry on some of this information. But one of the things we're going to start trying to do in the near future is put the PowerPoint on our website where you can go and look at it. You can get on our website and you'll be able to look at the PowerPoint because we're finding more and more people would like to have access to that. Three things. Be mindful of influences. Jump out of the boat when it's time to jump out of the boat, and put Jesus first. So here we go. In John, the first chapter, Peter is shown the Messiah and he's prophesied over. In John 6, Peter declares that he would not desert Jesus. In John 13, Peter doesn't want Jesus to wash his feet because he feels unworthy. In John 13 again, Peter declares he would lay his life down for Jesus. In John 18, Peter defends Jesus with a sword. John 18 again, Peter 3 times denies he even knows Jesus. And in John 20, Peter discovers the empty tomb. Then in John 21, so that's where we're going to rest. We came all the way through John. Peter has all these things. But let's take our 12 for 12 today and concentrate it here at the beginning and then in a minute in John 20 chapter. One of the two who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which means Peter. In Greek, it means Petros, or little pebble. And there's a lot about that. I said John 20 earlier. It's John 21. So we see that John, when it was writing about Peter, the first thing that happened, Jesus meets Peter, and right there on the spot, he prophesies over him. And so then we have John now, and I said 20, but it's 21. Let's look at 1 and 3, after the resurrection. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathan of Canaan in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." Simon doesn't know what to do. He's frustrated. The master's been taken away. He knows the master's been resurrected, but he doesn't know what to do with that. He's not understanding everything. And so what he naturally does is returns to something that's natural for him. We have to remember, we return often to the scene of our crime. So we have to be careful when we go backwards. We want to make sure what we left backwards was good enough to go back to. I tell people all the time, I didn't leave anything back there. I don't have to go there. So maybe you can get something out of that. But Simon Peter, he said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." See, influence right there. You see it. Peter is influencing the other disciples. And then they went out and they got into the boat, but they caught nothing that night. And see, this is not the first time they fished all night and they caught nothing. Back in Luke 5, where it's mentioned that they fished all night, and Jesus walks up on the shore and asks them how they do. They said, "We didn't do nothing." And he tells them to go back out, and then there's a reversal of that fortune. the type of that hidden in there is that Jesus was trying to get them not to focus so much on the Jews, because they didn't catch Jews. They would catch other people, and that was demonstrated later in the same book with another fishing episode where they were fishing for Gentiles. But why is Peter fishing at all? Because, again, I mentioned, unsure of what to do. We go back to things that are familiar. When we make a trek back from this pandemic, will we go back to something that's too familiar? Will we go back to something that's new familiar? Or will we go back to what the new familiar for the Lord is going to be? I hope that as a church we find our path back to the proper place. Many things we're unsure of for these men. What is clear is that Peter's definitely the leader of the group. He decides to go fishing. They follow, their influence, and all of us have influence over someone, and we need to be sure we're using it correctly. Take inventory, and if you have influence over somebody, be sure you're being a good influence to them. Make sure you're making good decisions, because believe it or not, somebody's watching you. We should be mindful of our influence and the influences we allow in our life. Careful who you allow to speak to you. I've talked to many people that have gotten into a different kind of doctrine and a different kind of interpretation of the Word, and it led them astray, and they were led off down a road that they didn't find any fruit on. Returning back to Peter, could Peter have led them to pray? Sure, he could have. Could he have led them to be patient? We'll find out what Jesus wanted. Yes, and the answer is going to be yes every time. But he did what he did because it was familiar. I know I'm pounding that point in today, but I want us to understand that's what we'll do when stress surrounds us. We'll go back to that familiar place where we're comfortable. And there's so much more I could say about this, and I probably will break this into 2 or 3 different sessions, because I recognize I'm not going to get anywhere close to an ending on this, but I will get to the place where we can have a new beginning. Peter is perhaps depressed, unsure, and restless, and they follow him because that's who they've been following. And you have to understand that. They weren't the leaders. Here's some scriptures that talks about choose who influences you well. Proverbs 13:20 says, he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That's the perfect setting for Christian men especially, but for Christians, period. We should be sharpening each other and getting each other more and more like Christ. Working on each other. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. How many times have we seen that one come true? So this last one leads us into the New Testament even further. Galatians 5:7-10. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you and kept you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. Yeast being a type of sin. And then he goes on to say, I am confident in the Lord that will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion will pay the penalty, whoever he may be. Christians don't cause confusion for other Christians. Oftentimes we settle for less than what we know the Scripture means, because we don't want to hurt their feelings, or we don't want to violate their sense of we're their best friend, or so on and so forth. If you're their best friend, tell them the truth according to the Word, and you've done them a true favor. If you linger on and just tell them some soft up mess, and just remember, like it's been said so many times, a half-truth is a whole lie. Tell people the truth. Lead them into the ways of the truth. I'm going to go ahead and continue here, but we'll break here in a minute and we'll cut this off. John 21:7-8, get out of the boat. That's one of the things we see that Peter did, and he got out of the boat. He got out of the boat this second time, and now, then the disciples whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he put his full pants back on. He got out of his diving suit. He got back out of his underwear, so to speak, and he put everything on, dove out there, and now he's swimming to the shore, but he jumped in the water. And a lot of people miss that opportunity. Opportunity will knock more than once because of grace, but if you're ready the first time it knocks, it's so much more powerful because you can just jump and get right in there with Jesus and start. The other disciples followed in the boat, and they were towing all the fish. By the way, if you're the first one to jump, you may get out of some work. So there you go. For they were not far from the shore. They were only about 100 yards. Now, amidst all these issues, he jumped out of the boat. Jumping out of the boat means this. He had a great love for Jesus Christ. Having excited about his relationship with him, he realizes his relationship. You know, the last time he kind of messed up and he left Jesus kind of holding the bag, threw him under the bus, denied him 3 times and all this stuff. And now Jesus is coming and he knows that reckoning for that is somewhere out there, but he doesn't even hesitate about what he's done wrong. He's jumping out of the boat and he's accepting the grace, pushing back doubt and fear, and he's putting faith in his place. It would have been easy for Peter to say, Jesus can never use me again. How many of us have said the same thing? Peter's had this fall, and he denied Jesus over the fire barrel, and he did it 3 times, and now he's been carrying us around for a while, and it's really building on him, and it's really a bad circumstance, and so on and so forth. But by pushing back that doubt and pushing back fear, he put himself in a position to receive Jesus' grace. Jumping out of the boat is wholehearted loyalty to Jesus Christ, and don't deny him. Jump out of the boat. Don't be like Peter. I'm going to stop us here for today, and I'm going to get into some other material. I'm going to zoom ahead, and I want us to see the last portion of this just so we can say we saw it. So in the last verses of John 21, 24, and 25, this is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We're talking about John. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have enough room for the books that would be written. So now we've sped up to the end of the lesson, and I only got to really cover one good, be mindful of influences, and we were just getting warmed up in jumping out of the boat, but also there's a third one. Put Jesus first, and that'll happen when he gets to the shore. That'll happen when he says yes to Jesus, and the multiple times Jesus asked Peter, will you, will you, will you? And there's a real secret to that, and we'll talk about that the next time we share this. So long, and have a great day, rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.